Hey, what's going on, guys? Leaman, Griffin with Scale Adventures. We got a pretty cool project for you guys today. We're going to be waterproofing this AXIAL SCX10 honcho. This is a buddy of mine, Alan's. He donated it to me to do this waterproofing video. We're going to be working with all stock electronics, the AXIAL AE2 speed controller. I think this one has a 27 turn brushed motor, the regular AXIAL receiver, and all pretty much stock. It's got Pitbull 1.9 tires, bead locks. It's got upgraded C-hubs and steering linkage and battery forward mod. And that's about it. But we're going to waterproof this thing so he can not worry about taking it in creeks and so he can basically go full scaling with this and not have to worry about ruining his electronics. Waterproofing is a relatively easy task. There's just a few simple tools you're going to need to get the job done. Number one, you're going to need your toolkit to disassemble the parts that we're going to need to waterproof. You're going to also need something like this. I use liquid electrical tape. You can get it at any hardware store. It's about $8. It comes with a brush like this, so you can coat it on. You can also use a product called Plastidip. Works very well. It's pretty similar. Plastidip is more of a rubberized. This is going to be a lot thicker. Another thing you're going to need is a grease. I use Utter Butter from CalRC. It's a really good compound. I love it. I use it for all my differential gears and my transmission gears and whatnot. Now, of course, this is not something that CalRC is saying will guarantee waterproof. This is just something I like to use when I'm waterproofing the trucks. And the third product is the CalRC Mousse Lick. This is a silicone-based spray that you're going to spray on all of your, I spray it on my exposed gears. I spray it on anything I don't want dirt or water to stick to. It's a really good, it dries, it goes on like a silicone shiny spray, and when it dries, it's non-slick or anything like that. And basically what it does is just going to protect your plastic parts, and it makes a repellent, like a waterproof barrier, so that dirt and whatnot doesn't stick to it. So I use this on top of the other products. You're gonna also need a razor blade, just a little small one. If you have a craft knife, you can use that too. I'm gonna use this to help me disassemble some of the electronic components where a screwdriver or the tools is just not small enough to get in there. Now, before we get started, let me just let you guys know this is purely an informative video. I'm not recommending that you go out and take all of your brand new components apart and slather all this stuff on them. This is just if you decide that you want to waterproof your rig, I'm giving you my recommendations on how I like to do it. So please don't send me messages or emails saying that you ruined your truck. This is not a recommendation. I'm, again, just explaining to you how I do it. We're going to start with the speed controller. We're going to go ahead and get that out of the way. You're also going to need a little pair of like miniature dikes. If you have any zip ties, you're going to want to cut them, get them out of the way. We'll go ahead and disconnect the motor wires. And then we can take our receiver wire from our speed controller going into our receiver box and go ahead and get that out of the way. First, let's get this battery plate out of the way here. I'll tell you what I love about this CalRC mat is now I can just drop my screws and my parts down on the mat, and I don't have to worry about them rolling off the table or getting lost, because this mat is actually magnetized. So I can take a screw and just drop it and it'll actually stick to the mat. Pretty cool feature. All right, let's get these two screws off here that hold the receiver box, and we'll open that bad boy up. And here we have all of our wiring for the receiver. Let's cut that zip tie there. Pull all this wiring out, and let's find which one it is. All right, now that we have our speed controller out of the truck, the first thing we're going to do is take the case apart on the speed controller body and expose the circuit board so that we can start coating our liquid electrical tape on here. So we want to take our razor blade and we want to score the sticker on the back side of the speed controller, and that's going to separate the upper and lower halves of the case. And then be careful with the razor blade, but we're going to use this to separate. There's little clips along the side that you're going to pull apart that'll separate the top and bottom halves of the case. Be careful not to break the tabs or else it won't go back together very well. All right, there you have it. We've got the two halves of the case separated. Just pull them apart like that. Now we can take the top part and set it aside. Next, you're going to want to remove the circuit board from the lower case, and you're going to want to be really careful not to pull on the heatsink or the wires, anything like that. There's actually, you can't really see them, but there's little tabs in here on all four corners of the board. And if you can get a tool like a razor blade, you can go down inside of there and lightly pry up, just like that, and the circuit board will pop out of the case. See there? Empty case. Set that aside, and now we're working with just the circuit board for the speed controller. This is what we're actually going to be waterproofing. Now, one thing I'm going to go ahead and do on this one, I'm going to remove the on-off switch. Anytime you have a wire coming out of a waterproofed area, it's just it's a crevice or a path for water to get in, because you can't perfectly seal around that edge. So I'm going to actually remove these two wires from the board, and I'm going to add a dab of solder right to where those two wires are, the two solder pads are. I'm going to add a large dab of solder to connect those two pads, and what that'll do is it'll basically always be on. You won't use the switch anymore. See our two jumpers right here? Just have a little dab of solder connecting them, and that's all you need to permanently lock your speed controller on. So now whenever you plug in the battery, your speed controller is automatically turned on. The next part's going to get a little messy, so I like to take a piece of paper, set it down. We're going to go ahead and set our circuit board on top of the paper and get our liquid electrical tape. And what you're going to want to do, I like to clean off the brush. I don't want too much on there. You're going to put a thin coat over the entire circuit board. And I'll show you here. You just want to take it and brush it on. Real simple. Get in all the cracks, add a little bit here. You want to coat every bit of this circuit board. And this is really the most crucial part, because if you don't do this fully and you leave a pinhole or a little crack where there's no electrical tape, that's where your water is going to get in. So now we've got our single coat of electrical tape. We're going to let that cure for a little bit before we start applying our second coat. One more tool you're going to need when doing this is an itty bitty precision screwdriver, because on the back of this receiver here you can see there are two screws. We'll go ahead and pop those off. Once you remove those, the case, other than this little slit here that we have to cut, where my razor blade is, once we cut this little slit right here, case should come right apart. There you have it. And this circuit board right here is what we're going to waterproof on the receiver pack. Now on this one, just pay attention. You can get around these little pins here. You can actually coat over the pins. You're just going to want to peel it off whenever you're done so that you can stick your plugs back in there and make a connection. So we'll get our electrical tape back out here. Again, clean off the brush, and we'll start doing our first coat on the receiver. There you have it. First coat of electrical tape on the receiver. Now we'll set that aside and let that go ahead and dry. And now our speed controller is pretty much dry to the touch, so we can start putting our second coat of electrical tape on it. All right, we'll let that dry. Time for coat number 2 on our receiver. If you want, when you're done with those 2 coats, you can put a 3rd coat on just to be safe. Now while those 2 are drying, we're going to start taking our servo apart so that we can waterproof it. This is a stock Axial AS3 steering servo. I recommend, if you're going to waterproof anything, waterproof your stock stuff, because you know, just until you get the method down, these are usually the easiest to replace and cheapest. So we want to start with a small Allen wrench. I want to say it's going to be 1.5 millimeter. Let me check that. Yep. We're going to remove the 4 screws on the back of the servo. Then we can pull the rear cover off of the servo. Set that aside. And you can start seeing that the servo will pretty much come apart at this point. I don't think we need to take it apart any further than this layer right here. There you go. And you can see now, I've taken these covers off. I have the complete servo and all of the gears exposed. So on this side we're going to waterproof, and on this side we're going to start applying our grease. Pay close attention to these gears, how they're laid out in here. You don't want them to fall off. There's actually nothing holding them on. And what you can do until you're ready to do the gears, you can go and put the front cover back on your servo and just leave the back exposed. So we'll let that dry now on our first coat before we put our second one on. Now we'll do our second coat on the servo. So the next thing we want to waterproof is the light controller that comes with the Axial Honcho. It comes heat shrink like this. We're going to want to take our razor blade, and I've already done it a little bit here. We're going to want to remove the heat shrink while being careful not to mess with any of the circuits on the board. Or cut ourselves. That's a little bit more important. We'll take the heat shrink off here. You can see it exposes the light controller. So same thing applies. We're going to take our liquid electrical tape and we're going to go over this entire surface here. I'm not going to show you guys because it's pretty simple, but one thing I do recommend is take the plugs and go ahead and plug them into here and then coat the entire thing in electrical tape. That way you don't have to worry about cleaning it out of the inside of these plugs, because they are kind of tedious to get into. So another thing that I like to do when waterproofing one of these trucks is pay attention to my gears and all my exposed mechanical linkage. We've got all the electronics taken care of. They're all curing and drying with the liquid electrical tape. What we want to do now is take our udder butter, and I like to apply it to all of my moving gears and parts that are exposed. So like right here in your drive shafts where your joints are, just take my finger and pack a little grease down in there. And it's messy, it's gonna get messy, but what this is gonna do is just provide a little bit of a water barrier so that when water does get on it, it doesn't get in there and seep in and start rusting those joints and corroding the parts. We'll flip it over here and we'll do the bottom ones. It's real simple to do. A little dab on your hand, wipe it, rotate a little bit, wipe a little more, rotate a little bit. I want to coat all of that. And I found that out the hard way because when I first waterproofed my truck, I wasn't paying attention to the gears, and it actually, when I got it out of the water, everything was fine. Let it sit on my shelf for a couple days in my shop, and when I came back out to it, everything was rusted. Every metal bolt piece, whatnot, was rusted. Now you can take care of the bolts by picking up a set of stainless screws. There's plenty of people out there that make them. They make screw kits for these where you can replace all of them with stainless steel. And of course stainless steel doesn't rust, so that's a good benefit there. But like I said, coat all these exposed parts here with the udder butter. And now that we've rotated the drive shaft, we'll go up here and finish up the top ones. There you go. Now that that's done, I'm not going to do this because it's pretty simple and straightforward, but I do recommend also taking apart your transmission, your front and your rear differential housing, and coating all your gears in there with Udder Butter too. It's a really good thick grease, goes on, it stays on the gear, it's not going to sling off and hug the outside of your housing. It's going to stay on the gears, and it's going to really protect them from the corrosion that you're going to get when you start driving underwater. Another thing, take off your spare gear cover. I'll actually go ahead and do that. Take off the spur gear cover, and you can see that exposes our spur gear and our pinion gear. And I like to take our slick and spray that on pretty liberally onto these gears. And I do that because these gears aren't necessarily exposed. You're not going to see them to clean them off, and you're rarely going to take that cover off. So you just want to know that they've got a nice barrier on them to keep the dirt and corrosion off, especially the rust off of those gears. So now we can put our cover back on. And as an extra precaution, what I like to do, any moving parts like you see right here at the top of your shock mounts, and then also if you flip the truck over, you see the mounts here at the bottom where your springs and your 4-link bars join, and then your C-hubs, any moving part like that, I want to take this spray, just spray it on it just a little bit. And again, what that's going to do, it's going to it's going to create a dry protective barrier. It's going to keep dirt and other stuff from sticking to all your parts when you come up out of the water. Now we can start putting our receiver back together now that it is cured and dried and is coated in liquid electrical tape. What I like to do is take even more electrical tape just as a precaution. This is just me being overly cautious. And I'll actually take it and coat the inside of the receiver box. Just a little coat, spread it around. Go. And then we're going to put the 2 screws back in. We'll move on to the servo. You can see we've got a nice thick buildup of liquid electrical tape on there. And what we're going to do now is, I'm going to, just as an extra layer of protection, I'll take the Udder Butter, as soon as I can get it open here, and I'll actually coat this as well on the circuit board. And again, this is just me being overcautious here. It's simply grease. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything to have it on there. Now we're going to take our front cover off, and we're going to take the Udder Butter again, and we're just going to pack all of these gears. Alright, so we're covered in Udder Butter now. Clean my hands off a little bit. We'll take the front cover of the servo, go ahead and slide it back down over the gearing, and we have our completed servo. And now what we're going to do is take our 1.5mm wrench and tighten all the screws back down. So we got our speed controller, nice and waterproofed, completely coated in liquid electrical tape. Take our liquid electrical tape and coat the inside of it, just like we did with our servo. So if there's any air bubbles or any holes or anything in my waterproofing job on the circuit board, hopefully they will get eaten up by this coating. Put it on pretty thick here. There we go. Alright, now we're going to drop our circuit board back down in here. And pay attention to the side with the little raised edge. That's, if you can see it, that's actually the side that you're going to put the wire going to your receiver coming out of. So we'll drop that in first. And then our other side should just snap in, just like that. We'll snap all this back together. And bam, there you have it. One waterproofed AE2 axial speed controller. One more thing I like to do when waterproofing, in the receiver box itself, Because it has an opening that water could potentially get in if you're submerged, I like to take a drill and drill a small hole somewhere in the center of the receiver box. Real simple, just a little itty bitty hole. What that's going to do is, if in fact it does get filled up with water, it'll start draining immediately. And you can drill a few holes if you want to help the process. It's really not going to hurt it to have some holes in it because the components themselves are waterproof, but there's no need in having a box full of water. So now it's all put back together. Let's throw some power on it and make sure everything works here. Let's kick our radio on. And now keep in mind, with the switch delete that we did, now whenever you plug the battery in, it is automatically on. We're going to jump in here, grab the plug, and connect that real quick. You can hear the infamous beeps there. And you can see our steering servo works. And she drives on her own. So everything is functioning. Now we have to go to the water and test her out and see if she's waterproof.